Hey y'all, Black Wrestling Card back with another uh, pretty brief commentary here. Um, well, I don't know about brief. I kind of want to get into a couple of topics here, but let's talk about hip hop and wrestling. Now, growing up in the '80s, of course, I was a big hip hop fan. Run DMC, Fat Boys, Beastie Boys, um, just countless. Right, being Rakim. And I was always, like I said, a wrestling fan. Wrestling and boxing were always my two favorite sports growing up. And it wasn't until the 90s that I started to see more of a hip hop influence kind of bleeding into professional wrestling. You had your PN Newses, you had your Two Cold Scorpios, you had the gangsters, which the gangsters, I think they personified it more than anyone. And you also had a situation where Master P got involved with WCW, you know, and he introduced a wrestler into WCW. I think his name, if I recall, was Big Swole and the No Limit Soldiers. But you also had the Insane Clown Posse, which you can consider them hip hop, like a horror hop type of group. But about a year ago, year and a half ago, I noticed that West Side Gun. If you're not familiar with West Side Gun, he has the best wrestling, I would say, bars in hip hop. You know, he has songs dedicated to the Lucha Bros. He has songs dedicated to Goldberg versus The Undertaker, Brett versus Shawn Michaels. He is a definite wrestling fan. I think he was at Double or Nothing this past year. He is a huge wrestling fan. But what surprised me was that Master P created a venture with West Side Gun, or West Side Gun with Master P, however that may worked out, and they bought House of Glory, which is based out of New York. Now I'm a House of Glory fan. I got into House of Glory, I would say about maybe 4 years ago. If you don't know, Private Party came from House of Glory. Lucha Bros actually wrestled at House of Glory. Jay White in New Japan, while he was on his excursion from New Japan, not only was he wrestling in ROH, but he also did matches in House of Glory. So, any indie wrestling fans out there probably have heard of House of Glory. The Amazing Red is the trainer there, if I'm not mistaken. But I also think that Sasha Banks trained there for a while. So we're not talking like indie that's not heard of. You know, House of Glory, if like I said, if you're a fan of independent wrestling, you've heard of House of Glory. If not, I suggest you go back, hit YouTube up, look at some of the matches from their cards, and it's a very energetic crowd up there. It's something that I want to experience, kind of like PWG. If I'm ever able, unfortunately, I never caught it in Reseda, but if I'm ever able to go to a PWG card, hell, that's like, one thing off of the bucket list there. But it brings me to the fact that hip hop has always kind of been a part of professional wrestling. And I say that because if you look at something like the Ric Flair documentary they made on ESPN, you heard guys like Snoop Dogg saying, hey, Ric Flair was like one of my influences growing up. Even people like LeBron James, who's a huge basketball megastar, but he's also a huge wrestling fan, and he's a huge hip hop fan, needless to say, but he spoke about how Ric Flair was the father of swag. And I remember back in the days, me being from New Orleans, I'm from the projects of New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm from the hood of New Orleans, Louisiana. But I remember not only my friends, but some of the older guys in the hood would go around saying, "Hey, to beat a man, you gotta beat the man." You know what I'm saying? If you if you if you don't like it, learn to love it because it's the best thing going today. Something that Ric Flair said, but this was back in like prime Ric Flair years, back in the '80s. We were all huge wrestling fans, and a lot of the hip hop influences, as far as like stunning and stuff like that, you can see where like the Four Horsemen influenced that. You would hear stories about Ric Flair going on bingers in Florida and flying all around the world, doing this, that, and the third, and wearing Rolexes and this, that, and the third. And you would hear not only then, but in the '90s and the 2000s, rappers, uh, pretty much shouting out Ric Flair, you know, because they were influenced by his lavish lifestyle, what he showed every Saturday evening, And I don't think at this point hip hop is represented to where it should be as far as professional wrestling is concerned. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have Street Profits, but with the Street Profits, I mean, Street Profits are almost like crime time to me. I enjoy Street Profits. I think Montez Ford that guy's got a future. Montez Ford has a future in professional wrestling. He's going to make Vince McMahon a lot of money if treated correctly. But just with Private Party and the Street Profits, I still don't think hip hop is represented in professional wrestling the way it could be. I'm not saying should be, but the way it could be. I'm not saying exploit the hip hop community to build viewership or anything like that. I'm saying, especially for a company like AEW or a company like ROH, if you were to put a focus on the hip hop community, because like I said, you have rappers like Westside Gunn making songs about and dropping bars about Kenny Omega, If you were to incorporate that into your company, let's say if AEW were to start like a working relationship with HOG and really capitalize on the hip hop factor that is pretty much latent, if you ask me, in professional wrestling, and just test it out and see how it works, see how it translates. You see a lot of TikTok videos on social media from professional wrestlers, and just about all of them are listening to some form of hip hop. I even seen Braun Strowman making a video on Twitter where he was when he was repeating the lyrics of Juicy by the Notorious B.I.G. He may not consider himself a hip hop fan, granted, but that just shows you that for him to know those lyrics, that song affected him, or he has memories of that song somewhere down the line in his lifetime. You see a heavy rock influence, which I give credit to Triple H. When I seen Io Shirai come to the ring with Poppy, and numerous other rock bands with the WWE, I give them credit. The WWE's always been on top of things like this. I mean, the WWE, they're on top of the rocking wrestling thing. You got to think they had a pretty much working relationship with MTV back then. Cyndi Lauper was at the first WrestleMania. Now, a lot of kids may not know who Cyndi Lauper is today, but for people my age, people almost 40 years old, if not 40 plus years old or whatever, Cyndi Lauper, they will tell you, Cyndi Lauper was almost on par with Madonna back then. She was just like right there with Madonna right there. So she was a huge name in music back then. And The WWE has always been on top of things like that, but so was Crockett Promotions, so was World Class. I mean, you had the first music video by professional wrestlers from the Freebirds when they were in World Class. You know, with the Bad Street USA, Bad Street Atlanta GA, Bad Street, Bad Street, and the whole USA thing. They were on top of things like that. They were the first faction to have ring music, the Freebirds. And that was from World Class. And look, everybody has entrance music nowadays, you know? But to that extent, I never felt that hip hop was included in the manner that it could have been. And like I said, I'm not saying exploit hip hop. I think hip hop is way more exploited now in other areas than it's ever been, you know, ever, to be honest. But I think that a focus on incorporating hip hop in a company, especially a young company like a AEW or a company like a ROH, I think it could be very beneficial to those companies to do so. I truly do. Um, like I said, if AEW were to start, because AEW has working relationships, but if they were to start some sort of a working relationship with HOG, or just, who knows, maybe start a HOG or work with HOG to make HOG a semi NXT for them, that can actually work out for them. But I just feel that hip hop has never really been fully used properly when it comes to professional wrestling. I'm sure a lot of other people feel that way. You have rappers that are, well, excuse me, you have wrestlers that are rappers. You know, Isaiah Swerve Scott or Shane Strickland to you all, well, a lot of people. But I know he has his own rap career to the side. I think Leo Rush has a rap career to the side. There are a couple other wrestlers that have their own like rap careers to the side of professional wrestling or music careers, if you want to say so. A couple of wrestlers have done that. I mean, you got to think the biggest wrestler in the past 20, yeah, let's say 20 years. The biggest wrestler in the past 20 years is John Cena, and he dropped the entire hip hop album. And he drew. Not only did he draw, you know, your everyday average wrestling fans, but he drew a new crowd. He drew a new crowd into wrestling. You know, he would later go on, because I think they overexposed Cena to a bit. But when John Cena first hit the scene with things like the spinner belt, especially with the spinner United States title, you had people of all shapes and sizes just like, wow, you know, that's something different. That's something we haven't seen. He's incorporating what you're seeing in the hood and rap videos and et cetera, into professional wrestling. And you know what? It worked, especially at that time. It worked. And it's never really been revisited. But that is what kept, because people remember before John Cena took that rapper gimmick, he was kind of hit or miss. There's rumors. I'm not even sure there's rumors. I think it's pretty much solidified now that, you know, he could have been fired at any moment, but he reinvented himself just by freestyling for Stephanie McMahon over a tuna can. And they ran with that. And look how it worked out for him. John Cena went from almost being fired in the WWE to now being the newest star in the Fast and Furious movies, headlining his own feature films such as Bumblebee. You know, he look how that worked out for him. But he used hip hop as a catapult. And like I said, now there's no one actually using hip hop to get that same catapult. Was it exploited with John Cena? Yeah, I can say it was kind of exploited, but it was exciting to see because it wasn't. It was new to an extent when the WWE tried it with him, because he would literally come to the ring and just bust a freestyle right in the middle of the ring, you know, and that was new. That was new. So I'm actually surprised all these years later, no one else is doing that. Even in ECW, when I brought up the gangsters, I mean, when they hit Smoky Mountain and they were in those Raider jackets and this, that, and the third, yada yada yada. You know what I'm saying? You seen the in your face hip hop influence they had then. So when they got to ECW and they would hit the ring, and before they hit the ring, you would hear Natural Born Killers by Dr. Dre and Ice Cube, and you would see the whole crowd throwing up their X's in the crowd, and they would run to the ring just straight like kicking ass and taking names, you know. And they would play that. I've not seen it since, but they would play Natural Born Killers on repeat the entire match, and it was exciting. It kept you. Not just the violence in the match, but it kept the music and everything else. It all blended perfectly, which I give Paul Heyman all the credit in the world for coming up with that idea and using it to benefit New Jack and Mustafa. You know, like I said, it really hasn't been taken advantage of or used in today's era. And I think that it's something that these companies ought to pay attention, because the hip hop community is just that, a hip hop community, you know? And right now, if you ask me, if you want to at least try to tap into that community, maybe some of that community can bleed over into professional wrestling. Maybe some of that community can bleed over and bring up viewership numbers. Maybe some of that community can bleed over and bring up attendance numbers, a la what Kenny Omega does so well when you're talking the video game community, which was genius, by the way. But maybe some of that can actually bleed over and benefit professional wrestling. It's just a thought, but that's my commentary on that. I think that it should be given a shot, and I don't think it. Especially this generation of wrestling fans, it really hasn't been attempted. And I think it should be attempted. That's just my commentary. If you have any questions or if you have any thoughts about it, leave a message. Hit the subscribe button and I'll hit you back. And to the next video.